So, blessings, good evening. Today is the 5th of December, if I count correctly, which means it's the birthday of the monastery. The land that we're sitting on at this moment was purchased and offered by the Su family, Billy and Su and the Su family, 23 years ago to this date. And it's also the birthday of the last king of Thailand, King Bhumibol Adulyadej. So it's also Father's Day in Thailand. So it's a very auspicious, easily remembered day, the day that the monastery began with the offering of the land. Jeffrey Tan travelled to Thailand with the title deed and offered it to Lumpur Anand. And myself, Lumpur Anand, we travelled to Ubon and offered the title of this land to Lumpur Liam, so it could become a branch monastery of Ajahn Chah. So, you might say an auspicious day, the monastery's birthday. And what better way to celebrate a birthday than to have a Dhamma discussion. So we have a few questions have come in, which we will endeavour to answer tonight. So the first question is, Dear Lumpur, thank you for your teachings. How should one contemplate the Four Noble Truths effectively so as to reduce one's suffering? During meditation, if dukkha arises in mental or physical form, what is the right way to contemplate it? Thank you. Well, fortunately we just chanted the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where the Buddha gives explanation of the Four Noble Truths and how to cultivate them and penetrate them to completely liberate the mind from ignorance, craving, attachment, and attain the deathless, Nibbana. So if you go back and read that chant that we just did, the sutta, you'll see that dukkha is to be known. You have to know dukkha as dukkha. Dukkha is like this. So if it's pain, discomfort, suffering in the body, you know it. If it's mental pain, unpleasant memories, negative thoughts and perceptions popping up, you have to know them. And that's why we have to cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path, all those different factors, because that Noble Path is cultivating the faculties of mind to know the way things are, particularly to know dukkha as it is, as dukkha, but also to know the ending or realize the ending of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha. So dukkha is a very broad term. It can mean physical pain, mental pain, can just refer to the unstable, unsatisfactory nature of all phenomena in this world, physical and mental, everything. People, buildings, mountains, trees, whatever, are subject to arise and pass away. So they're dukkha in that sense, they don't last. Things that don't last can't bring us sukha, true happiness or lasting happiness. Of course we get caught up into the pleasures of the world, and that's why we don't see dukkha or understand or know dukkha as dukkha. Rather than establishing mindfulness and knowing dukkha, we run away from it. We escape from it into distraction, pleasure, pleasure of just thoughts and fantasies and views and opinions, physical pleasure that comes through our senses, physical and mental pleasure is a large part of our activity as human beings, is seeking pleasure to escape from and get away from dukkha, rather than contemplate, to know dukkha and contemplate it. The Buddha said, dukkha is to be known, and we call that a duty, a gicca. The Pali term, parinyaya gicca. We have to know. You could call it the most useful kind of knowledge a human being can develop. Parinyaya, it's the same word we use for any kind of knowledge. So it could be, say you go to college and get a diploma or degree, that's knowledge. But it's more knowledge just about the world and how to do things and understand things in the world. It's not yet the knowledge for the ending of suffering, the ending of dukkha. But parinyaya gicca is the duty of knowing dukkha as dukkha. Or another thing we chant every morning, if you do the morning chanting, we say dukkho tina dukkha parita, bound by dukkha and obstructed by dukkha. That's the nature of the unenlightened human mind. Just bound up with dukkha. We're always experiencing little dukkha, irritation, pain, frustrations. Big dukkha, trauma, depression, all kinds of fear and anxiety. Big dukkha, small dukkha, we're bound up with it. But the way out of dukkha, or way beyond dukkha, is to know it, to know dukkha as dukkha, rather than just try and run away from it or blot it out. So we need the spiritual faculties of mindfulness and wisdom and the bharamis such as patience, all the good qualities that we develop in the practice in order to know dukkha as dukkha. Then we can go beyond it and end it. And, what did the Buddha teach? He taught suffering, dukkha, and the end of suffering, the end of dukkha. That's our goal. How to practice in kind of daily life, whether it's in meditation or just as you go about your business, it's a really good reflection. Am I creating dukkha out of this situation? Sometimes we use another word for dukkha. We might say suffering, stress, problem. Am I making a problem out of this? Who makes a problem out of things? Well, the mind that is still caught up in craving and attachment makes a problem out of everything. Everything becomes a problem when we're not mindful and we're not wise. So even good things become a problem. Say you've got money in your pocket and you want to buy a treat for yourself or someone else. What should I buy? It becomes a problem, doesn't it? Should I buy this? Should I buy that? Do I want this? Do I want that? Even when you have the means to attain pleasure and fulfill some desire, it still becomes a problem. And of course, when you don't have the means, you've got no money in your pocket, or even bigger problem. Or if someone else is trying to get your money from you. That's why monks have so few problems, because they've got no money at all, so they just give up thinking in that way. And life becomes very easy when you've got no money. You give up your expectations and you give up a lot of dukkha at the same time. Next question. I am mindful not to be attached to having to gain something during my sitting and walking meditation. The goal of my daily practice is to learn to let go bit by bit. I see the need to be master of my mind, to learn to be in control of the mind by putting a stop to unwholesome mental states. Otherwise, when I reach my deathbed, I will not be able to control my thoughts. You mentioned this in your talk on dispassion the other day. We should not force it, but let dispassion arise naturally through our practice of mindfulness and reflection. Is this the right view? Yeah, you can't force wisdom to arise. Wisdom isn't something that arises just through sheer willpower or desire. It comes through effort applied to cultivating the qualities of mind that will lead to insight and understanding the way things are. So, for example, mindfulness. So we do develop practice through effort. Of course, we have to put effort in. And the Buddha said it's a teaching of effort. It's not for the lazy. There is no lazy way to Nibbana. If there was, everyone would be enlightened. So it requires effort, but you can't force it. You're developing, particularly number one, you're developing peaceful conduct of body and speech and mind in your daily life. The way you go about your business, the way you interact with other people in the world, the way you earn your living. Whether you're a monk or a lay person, a monk still earns his living, takes his bowl and receives alms food. That's our living. If you're a lay person, you go out to work and earn money. But we have to do it in a peaceful way so we're not creating a lot of negative karma and suffering for ourselves or others. And then we have to cultivate mindfulness, continuous mindfulness, to support the investigation of the truth, called Dhamma vichaya, which gives rise to wisdom. And with wisdom comes all kinds of qualities such as disenchantment, dispassion, letting go, relinquishment, because wisdom, the quality of wisdom, the clear seeing, the clear knowledge of the way things are, you don't grasp at things anymore that cause you suffering. Just as a child once burnt doesn't grab hold of fire anymore because they know they'll hurt if they do, and they don't need to be taught that lesson again, usually. Wisdom is like that. It's that knowledge and vision of the way things are that just sticks in your mind and changes the way you think and relate to the world. And one aspect of it is dispassion. You get tired of chasing after experiences, material objects, pleasures, things that cannot give you lasting or ultimate happiness and actually bring with them a lot of suffering. You know, there's that sense of you're always hoping that the thing you get will satisfy you, but then of course it fades. The feeling of satisfaction or the thing that provides it fades. You're back to square one, but your mind is still being conditioned by craving, so maybe your craving actually grows through that. Whereas wisdom sees through that and says, oh, I don't want to keep craving because I'm suffering from this craving, so you start experiencing dispassion, relinquishment, letting go. You get tired of craving, tired of clinging, tired of wanting, tired of dukkha, suffering, tired ultimately of being born and dying, whether it's temporary birth and death of just born into another experience, another mental state, or the big picture born and dying of life after life, what we call samsara or vata samsara, the circuit or cycle of birth and death. The mind that tires of that is the mind that's ready for Nibbana. But that's a natural process, you can't force that. If there's still forcing involved, that's ego, sense of self. It will lead to more suffering, more attachment. And you often hear people say, oh, I'm fed up with life, I just want Nibbana. But that fed up with life is usually a reaction of aversion to suffering. Rather than seeing suffering as suffering and knowing it as suffering, there's a reaction to it because it's painful. Nobody likes pain, so we tend to not like it, not want it, and so we react with aversion. But that's not true wisdom yet. That's not true dispassion, disenchantment, or what we call nibbida. This is just aversion, trying to get away from the suffering. And often, we want everything, don't we? We want the best bits, we want the pleasure, but we don't want the pain that comes with the pleasure. So we're constantly in a whirl, in a tizzle, confused. On the one hand, you want to avoid pain and let go of pain, but you still want pleasure, which leads to more pain. And that's the essence of samsara. If you step back from it and look, it's very sad. But that sadness can motivate you to practice. And you look for a way out of that suffering, seeing how sad it is, you say, oh, the Buddha knew the way out. So you start following the Buddha and practicing the Buddha's way. And as you cultivate the path, sila, samadhi, panya, insight, then dispassion arises quite naturally. This meditator goes on to ask, if I'm outside and my schedule is quite different every day, can I make time to cultivate elsewhere when it's convenient, or do I have to stick to one meditation place? Thank you. Cultivate elsewhere. I'm not sure whether we're talking about one object, meaning one place for your mind, such as the breath, for instance, or are you talking about a location, a physical place? So like, can you practice outside of the monastery or the retreat center, for instance? So if that's the question, yes, you can practice anywhere that your body goes to, because the place of practice is this body, this mind, what we call the 5 khandhas, 5 aggregates, 5 groups of experience that make up a human being. They go with you wherever you go. So the Buddha said we can cultivate mindfulness, standing, walking, sitting, lying down, eating, chewing, bathing, going to the toilet, working, turning, stretching. Everything is covered if you read the Satipatthana Sutta. So, whether you do exercise or you go to walk or you go to work or you drive your car, every aspect of your life can become part of the practice. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. What helps is developing a meditation object regularly, even if you can't develop it all the time because you've got to think and talk and do all these different activities. You can keep coming back to it, so it becomes like a reference point. And I know people who do mindfulness of breathing at the red light. So you drive a car, you can't do mindfulness of breathing maybe when you're driving because it's too important to watch the road and be a good driver. But when you pause your driving, you can. You can come back to the breath for a few moments before you start your journey again. You can be typing at a computer and you have to focus on the information you're putting in, what you're reading, assessing it, whatever. But when you're finished, you have a natural pause or break in your work, you can come back to the breath, for instance. Or you have a meeting where you're talking to people, but there'll be a period where you don't have to speak. You can come back to the breath maybe as you're listening or just waiting, idling, waiting for the next activity. So, yes, you can use a meditation object all the time, but you have to pause sometimes to speak, to think, to make judgments, to do things, of course. And you can practice anywhere. So try and get that attitude going. Then you can make all aspects of your practice come up, all aspects of your life, your day, come up as practice. If you've got kids, the kids are part of your practice. looking after, watching your temper, because we lose our temper with kids, watching your irritations, your frustrations, your worries about your kids. Sometimes your kids are busy, so you can do a little bit of breathing meditation. Sometimes you just manage your mood and your mental states and your speech while you're dealing with your kid. Everything is part of the practice. Second question, may I combine my afternoon meditation together with the evening meditation? If time isn't possible for me to do my afternoon cultivation. So this person, they do 5 minutes with their children. They've got young children, so they do 5 minutes sitting with their children, and then 30 minutes sitting or walking meditation after the children have gone to sleep on their own. Can you combine them? Well, potentially, yes. If you're sitting with young kids, of course, they're not going to sit still for very long, so 5 minutes probably is maximum, and that's okay. But it's still worth it, getting them in the habit of sitting still, and maybe focusing on a theme such as metta, loving kindness. And you might do it with them, and you may speak to them as they're doing it. You know, like a guided meditation, or you can play a tape, something off the net. When you're doing your own meditation, well, maybe you might just do it in silence, or you may play a guided meditation or a talk. That's up to you. And in the lay life, you have to be flexible, don't you? So sometimes you have more time, you can extend your meditation. Sometimes you've got less time. You're tired or you're busy, so you've got less time. So you have to be a little bit adaptable. And sometimes you can extend, so say you have an afternoon where miraculously the kids are quiet. They've gone out to a friend's house, or they're asleep, whatever it may be. You may have suddenly a few hours of free time. Well, don't waste it on frivolous, unnecessary things. Of course, you may have all kinds of household duties to do, chores, work to do, but if you have some free time and there's no pressure, maybe do some longer meditation, listen to a Dhamma talk, do some chanting, and get really into it, like a little temporary retreat just for an afternoon or something. You can do that. So you have to take your chance when you get it in the lay life. So if everything's quiet, the time is there, we'll take it as your golden opportunity to develop a bit more meditation than usual. And then other times you've got no free time, you're just caught up in the rush of work or kids or whatever, and you have to accept that. So part of mindfulness practice is also being aware, we call this clear comprehension, sati sampajanya, aware of what's the appropriate activity at this time. What am I doing now? What's the appropriate thing at this time? Whether you've got more free time or less, you have to know that, don't you? Next question. When I drop my kid off at school, I take a brisk walk back home. Could I consider this a time to do mindful walking? I see myself trying to squeeze my time in to do mindful walking, but when there is a meeting or appointment, I realize it's quite challenging to follow this schedule. So I must make time to do it. Is that correct? Yes, part of meditation practice means giving value to the practice of meditation. You see it as something important. If it's something important, you will make time. We make time for a lot of unimportant stuff. Chit-chat, entertainments, eating, sleeping, all kinds of things which are maybe only partially important, partially relevant maybe. meditation is perhaps one of the most important things you'll do in your life, so make time for it, give it value. So partly that means in your day you think when you might have an occasion to practice some really quality meditation, your mindfulness, quietly on your own without other distractions. When can you do that? So often it's early morning before other people have got out. I know it's difficult. I know many parents who say they get up early to meditate because their kids are asleep, and as soon as they're up, then the kids get up. And they're sitting there meditating, and the kids come and clamber all over them. What can you do? You just have to wait for your kids to grow up a bit more, maybe. But look for the time in your day when you can meditate. And that may include walking your kid to school, walking them back, mindful walking, maybe part of your exercise, going for walks, runs, yoga, physical training, whatever. You have to think how you can incorporate mindful walking, mindful sitting, other moments of mindfulness in your day, and improve that and increase the amount of time doing that. You just have to work with your own lifestyle and what's available to you and make the best of what's available. Ajahn, I have 2 questions. What is the most efficient way to cultivate more good karma? That's the first question. Well, good karma means good intention. Karma means intentional action, volitional action. So you're training in good intentions, meaning intentions rooted in renunciation or letting go of attachment, sensuality, craving, desire. Intentions rooted in non-ill will, non-anger, so that means kindness. Intentions rooted in non-hatred, non-cruelty, which means compassion. So these are the 3 kind of roots of good karma, wholesome karma. It's what we call samma sankappa. So nekama means letting go of greed and sensual attachment. So the opposite of that is cultivating contentment, appreciation, moderation, those kind of qualities, as well as mindfulness, obviously, and ultimately developing samadhi, states of stillness and calm. That's really good karma. Cultivating non-ill will, kindness, every day. Cultivate metta, kindness in your thinking, and this will flow on into your speech, your actions. Compassion as well. Sympathize. Sometimes you see somebody suffering, there's not much you can do, but at least you can have compassion for them, be sensitive, be aware to their suffering, and have the wish for them to be free from suffering, as opposed to hatred, cruelty. So it's just 3 simple guidelines of skillful intentions to develop on a daily basis. Non-attachment, non-greed, non-anger, non-hatred. And coming out of that, also cultivating mindfulness, very powerful good karma, and then wisdom, panya, insight into the true nature of things. So better to have a moment of insight than to live 100 years without insight. So you have the opportunity this very day, at this very moment, to do something that will be good for you now and for the future, definitely guaranteed. So if you just pause and reflect on the arising and ceasing of phenomena, the sound of my voice, sound of the words, feelings in your body, thoughts running through your mind, some aspect of impermanent phenomena, physical or mental at this moment, you're doing more for yourself than you have done in many previous lives. So there's always the opportunity to make good karma. You can have a moment of kindness, a kind thought, or say a few kind words, do a kind action for somebody close to you, a parent, a child, a friend. at any moment you have the opportunity to make good karma. It's up to you to take that opportunity. So the teachings of the Buddha, listening to them, reading them, hearing this kind of thing will encourage you in that direction, but you have to take the opportunity. You have to see it as important. You could even say it as life-saving. Making good karma is life-saving. Take that chance. If you have a chance to save one person, yourself, by bringing yourself to make more good karma, we'll take that chance. The opposite is you're drowning in bad karma. If you don't train, you don't cultivate good karma, then naturally you'll tend towards bad karma. As water flows downhill all the time, its nature is to flow downhill. The untrained mind flows downwards towards greed, anger, delusion, the making of bad karma, following unskillful intentions. So make the effort to train, to practice every moment of every day if you can. There's always more to do. Next question. Ajahn, do you think piti, rapture, tears that happen when I'm sitting meditation are a way to clean the citta? Well, they're what we call rapture. Rapture manifests in many ways. It's caused by the mind coming closer to the Dhamma in one way or not, or one way or another. So it can be hearing Dhamma, recollecting Dhamma, paying attention to a meditation object, and body and mind calms down. It could be seeing somebody else doing something good, remembering something good you've done yourself. There's many ways that rapture arises, many causes. The way, how it manifests, there's many ways it manifests. So tears forming in your eyes, tears of joy, tears of realization of the Dhamma is a very common one. Sometimes it's streams of tears going on and on and on. More likely it's just moistening in the eyes. But there's other kinds of rapture, like standing, goosebumps. You just think of your meditation object, goosebumps arise. Or you hear some true Dhamma or reflect on the true Dhamma, goosebumps arise. Tingling sensations, waves of rapture coming up and down your body. If you're meditating, probably your rapture will get deeper and more profound, so maybe your whole body feels very light. All the heaviness of the body goes, painful feelings disappear. If it goes even deeper, maybe your whole body seems to disappear. It's like your mind is there, you're aware, but your body is gone. So it's like you're just floating in midair. You're very light, and often that's accompanied by brightness of mind, light. The heaviness of the body is gone, and the mind unifies on a meditation object very easily and for a long time when that happens, usually. Rapture itself, it's one of the 5 factors of samadhi. It can be just momentary, so it just comes and goes. You can have tears forming, you can have the feelings of lightness, waves of rapture coming and going just very briefly. Or it can be intense and last for a long time. It can last for days. Especially have deep insight with wisdom. Rapture comes from wisdom and insight as well as samadhi. So if you have deep insight into the Four Noble Truths in any of their aspects, so seeing a defilement, as a cause of suffering, abandoning it. So seeing impermanence, something you saw as permanent, as a source of happiness, and now realizing it's impermanent, there's no happiness in that, and letting go can give rise to rapture that can last for days. And the Arya-Pugalas, the noble ones, they have rapture all the time. It still can be more modest, more intense, it will vary, but one of the aspects of noble ones is that their mind is free from a lot of defilement, or all defilement for an arahant, but even for a sotapanna is partially free of defilement. When the mind is free from defilement, there'll naturally be some piti and rapture there. So it's a kind of, becomes part of the spiritual progress of the mind towards Nibbana. Piti, we will experience rapture in different forms at different times, sometimes more intense, sometimes more brief. Ajahn, what does it mean by the term no affection like that for oneself? Well, who do we love most? We love ourselves most. I think this is a reference to that incident in the life of the Buddha, King Pasenadi and his Queen Malika. Queen Malika was smarter than the king. She's a wise queen, practicing the Dhamma, very smart. And the king had the ego of a king. He also had many good qualities and good barami, but he wasn't as smart as Malika. So he was a bit vain, and he wanted her to. He asked her. He said, "Oh, who do you love most in the world?" Expecting her to say "you." You know, like all those songs we hear every day that are just lying to us. I love you the most in the world. That's a lie. Do not believe that song. Whether it's a song, a movie, a novel, it's all lies. She spoke the truth. I love myself most, because that's what every human being should be answering when that question is asked. Because you attach to yourself before even the person you love. You may love someone greatly, a child, a partner, a parent, but you love yourself the most, because all your defilements are centered on yourself. The king wasn't satisfied with that answer, so he went to the Buddha for confirmation, probably in the way husband and wives seem to go on. You know, I've never been married, so I'm not speaking from experience, but I've seen a lot of husband and wives at work, and they're always competing with each other to see who's smarter, who can outwit the other, who knows more, back and forth, and this is partly some of the problems of married life. So the king wanted confirmation. He wanted to prove maybe that Malika got it wrong. Goes to the Buddha and says she loves herself more than anyone in the world. What do you say? And the Buddha said, yeah, that's right. And so she was probably going, yes, I outwitted him again. So we all love ourselves the most. And the Buddha said that. So no affection like that for oneself. And there's a few translations of the term, but it's sort of basically around that phrase. Then you got another phrase. What does the phrase, among the waters the rain is supreme? I can't think offhand immediately what that's from, but there's a few times the Buddha talks about rain. Obviously the cleansing effect of rain. Generally rain is seen as a positive thing. It washes away dust and dirt, fertilizes the ground for growth, for crops and fruit and so on. Can be stored for drinking and so on. So generally it's seen as a good thing. So amongst the waters the rain is supreme. Well, I think the Buddha once said the Dhamma is like the rain. The Buddha is like the clouds. The Dhamma is like the rain. The Sangha is like the ground, the fertile ground that when the rain falls it washes away the dust. Whether that's from the Buddha or commentary, I can't quite remember. But that would be the best rain. The Dhamma is the best of everything. It's the best taste, the best water, the best knowledge, the best everything, because it ends suffering. So if we are comparing the Dhamma to rain, it would be the best kind of water. And we say when you practice Dhamma, your mind is lubricated with the good qualities, the good karma, like water. Another question. Hello from the UK, Lumpur. I am a dad. I work full-time and care for my disabled and dying mum. Or maybe there's two people. I think a word has dropped out. Disabled somebody, and I'm also caring for my dying mum. So disabled partner, child, I'm not sure. Or dad, maybe, disabled dad. Recently, life has been getting too much for me, and a few times I've contemplated taking my own life. I wake up every day feeling worthless, feeling as though I can't do anything right, whatever I do. I try taking time for myself, but that hasn't helped. I tried to sit in meditation more frequently in the hope to fight this, and I've also been trying harder in holding the 5 precepts and believing for so long that this too shall pass, and that the impermanence of this feeling would go. But I'm so tired and having so little left to fight with, not sure what to do. Can you give me some advice? Well, I don't know who you are, and you live on the other side of the globe from us. If you're listening, obviously we wish you well. But actually what you describe here sounds very inspiring, I think, for many people. You're looking after a disabled parent, perhaps, and a dying mother. You're trying to meditate, trying to keep the 5 precepts. This is all really good stuff. So don't quit, don't give up. Your life is definitely not worthless. It's definitely worth something. All that you've described. Of course, as we go through life, there are problems, obstacles, challenges. Everyone has something. You seem to have your fair share. Obviously, it's quite a difficult situation you're in, but you seem to be approaching it with the right attitude and developing the right qualities and skills. Keep going. If you're really exhausted by your situation, well, try and find skillful ways to get some rest or some break, some time out from what you're doing. So I don't know what your situation is, whether there's people who can help, other family members or government service agencies or whatever. Try and get some help, so at least occasionally in a day or occasionally through your week, your month, you can get a bit of time to yourself to rest and recover, maybe do some meditation, do some different activities that are good for you, so that you don't get burnt out. It sounds like you're getting burnt out, so you need to look after yourself so that you can look after these other people. And this is a very common phenomenon when we're looking after people who are disabled, dying, elderly, sick, whatever. It's demanding, so you also have to look after yourself in that scenario. You've got these people around you you're caring for, but you're one person in that scenario. You also have to care for yourself. In the short term, meditation is good, listening to Dhamma is good, it can be uplifting, give us some good advice how to deal with our problems, and try to see the good in what you're doing. Be patient with the tiredness, the obstacles you are encountering. Be patient, and my teacher Ajahn Chah always said patience is the number one quality for any problem you encounter during your practice or in your life. Just keep coming back to patience. And patience means not giving up, keep going. It also means keeping your mind in a good state while you face your problems. Don't give in to the negativity, the depression, the worries and anxieties. Patience means keeping a good state of mind as you face your problem. So whatever will help you to do that. That's why I say get some rest, get some time to yourself within your situation. Find things that uplift you, enjoy in things that bring you enjoyment. Sense of humour. Activities with friends or other people that maybe uplift you. You have to look for that, ways to uplift yourself to help you get that rest while you're facing your problems. And this will help you to be patient. but be patient. A lot of questions today. Dear Luang Por, many thanks for your teachings. I wish you well. Thank you. The mind is defined as a quality that knows. Please correct me if I'm wrong. For a person who is unenlightened, the knowing quality sometimes teaches the mind wisdom, but then fades away. How do we make this quality appear more consistently? How do we know when we know and not to be confused with wrong knowing? What is this knowing? I'm getting quite confused right now. Yeah, I'm getting confused reading it. And I hope to seek your wisdom to answer these questions. Yeah, knowing is just knowing. It's the quality of present moment awareness. We summarize it as mindfulness, but it's not mindfulness alone. It's mindfulness and what we call clear comprehension, clear all-round awareness of whatever it is you're engaged with, involved with. And it's wisdom as well, panya, or right view, cultivating right view, panya, which is samadhi. So, in the beginning of practice, we read, we listen to help give us the idea how to practice, what we're doing, where we're going, the goal of the practice, to alert us to some of the pitfalls, the wrong turns we could take. So listen to Dhamma, that will help. But as you say, the deepest kind of knowledge is what we call bhavana maya panya, the knowledge that comes from bhavana, meditation. So number one, mindfulness. If there's no mindfulness present in the mind, then the mind is gone to sleep. Even if you're doing something, you're active, you're not physically asleep, but your mind has gone to sleep when you're not mindful. Daydreaming, fantasizing, following kilesas, greed, anger, delusion, going about your business but in a kind of daze, in a kind of habitual, perfunctory way. We lose our mindfulness all the time. When there's no mindfulness, the mind is not really knowing truly or correctly. It starts to know wrongly, as you said, you pointed out. So like when greed hijacks the mind, you can still know, and you know the way to the fridge to get the food that you like. So you still know things, but your knowledge and your knowing is now the servant of your greed. When you're angry, you know how to express anger. You can say the words that will express your anger or hurt someone else because you want to hurt them because you're angry. You can do and say things in anger or in greed. So there's a certain kind of knowing there, but it's wrong knowing because it's no longer with mindfulness and wisdom for the end of suffering. It's now knowing to increase suffering. But the whole point is you don't realize, so it's wrong knowing. So, it's like technology. You can use technology to end suffering, or you can use technology to increase suffering. Technology comes from knowledge. But then there's a higher knowledge or another kind of knowledge behind the technology. Who's using it and for why, in what purpose and why. So knowledge in Buddhism, we have these different levels. And true knowledge is always for the end of suffering. That's what we have to come back for, and that's why we meditate, and that's why we develop mindfulness every day. So you can know yourself and you'll know how suffering is arising, and then you can do things to abandon it. And that's wisdom. So mindfulness and wisdom work together like two friends, two sides of the same thing. This side of the hand, that side of the hand. It's one hand, but it's got two sides. They work together. So you deepen your knowledge and knowing by cultivating mindfulness. Keep doing it. Do it a lot. The Buddha said, bhavita bahulikata. Do it a lot. The Buddha never said meditate a little bit. Do it a lot. Next question, Ajahn. 3 trainings in higher ethics, higher mind, and higher wisdom. What does this mean, higher mind? Higher mind. The better developed mind, the superior mind. Ultimately the enlightened mind, but in terms of the training, particularly refers to the citta samadhi, developing samadhi, developing the ability to go beyond the 5 hindrances to samadhi, so attaining one-pointedness, unification of mind, the higher mind, as opposed to the mind still under the influence of the hindrances, still getting greedy, angry, sleepy, doubtful, worried, anxious. The mind under the hindrances doesn't work so well, doesn't see the truth so well. The wisdom that comes from the hindrances is a little bit of wisdom, but then it fades, like the last question. It doesn't last. When we go beyond the hindrances, we train the higher mind, then higher wisdom can arise, wisdom that really frees the mind from defilements and sticks with you. Wherever you go, it's with you. You know greed is a cause of suffering, you know anger is a cause of suffering. You don't go there anymore because you know it causes suffering. That's higher wisdom, higher knowledge. It depends on the higher mind. And the higher mind depends on the higher conduct or ethics. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, these 3 things work together. They're inseparable. It's not like one and not the other. And it's not like you just develop one and the others don't develop. You develop them all together. Ajahn, I have a question on the 8 precepts. Is using a phone to type a message considered as talking? Yes, it is. Good text, kind text, text with wisdom, good. Unskillful text, dishonest text, greedy text, angry text, bad. It's still talking, it's just using technology. So people often forget that because they can text and there's no immediate reaction because the person reading the text is not there, they're in another part of the world. And that's where a lot of trouble comes from now, isn't it? Your text can convey a message. Sometimes it's confusing. Often, from what I can see, people read a text and they misunderstand it because we've rushed to type very quickly, the wrong word, miss a word, drop a word, don't convey the meaning very well. So often texting itself causes trouble. And then maybe it's an expression of our greed, anger, delusion. It may be dishonest, even if it's honest, it may be the wrong words, the wrong time, the wrong method, so many possibilities for error. Just like verbal conversation, but when you converse with someone, at least you can maybe see them, sense what they're talking about, fix things as you go along quickly, whereas texts are a little bit more distant, so there's more opportunity for misunderstanding, hurt feelings, wrong messages, untrue messages. So yes, it comes under talking. So be mindful as you text, consider what you're writing, what you're texting. I understand that keeping the 8 precepts, one cannot talk for a day. Not correct, that's not in the 8 precepts. Maybe you go on a meditation retreat to a retreat center or a monastery, you may take on the rule, I won't speak, what we call noble silence. But that's an extra rule on top of the 8 precepts. It's not in the 8 precepts themselves. What the Buddha taught is right speech. So that needs practice. So you have to practice right speech within the 8 precepts, so not lying, not abusing, and so not using speech to further defilement. We use speech to further the Dhamma, to understand the Dhamma. And as far as noble silence goes, that's an optional thing you may take on, and many people do, and it's quite helpful if you're always talking and thinking. It can help to slow you down, quieten you down. It can be a useful practice. It's not actually part of the 8 precepts. Question. My daughter is playing with toys. Is it okay for her to play with kids' toys if they are keeping the 8 precepts? That's the trouble with kids, in the sense they may not yet fully understand the meaning and purpose and the way to practice 8 precepts because they're just kids. It doesn't mean to say they can't keep at least some of them or try to develop some of those qualities. So if your kid is reasonably strong, healthy, maybe they can just eat in the morning and not in the afternoon. So they practice Vikala Bhojana, the 6th precept. But kids often need entertaining, don't they? They're too bored or restless to be just meditating or listening to Dhamma all day. So what you have to be clear on is that if they are playing games, playing with their toys, they're not fully keeping the 8 precepts yet. There's nothing wrong with a kid playing with toys, but what you want to do is make sure they have that understanding so that they're not tricking themselves, or maybe you're tricking yourself thinking, oh, my kid is keeping the 8 precepts, but maybe they're not fully understanding of the intention and the action that they're doing. Maybe a kid doesn't even think about, say, the 3rd precept of celibacy. They're not even thinking about that if they're a young kid. So the 8 precepts are the intention to refrain from certain activities, certain actions, and that has to be done with mindfulness and understanding. So certainly train your kids in the 5 precepts and maybe even as much as they can the 8 precepts when the time is right. But be careful not to call it the 8 precepts if it's not, because we want to be absolutely clear what we're training in and develop that understanding. And maybe you tell your kid you're keeping the 8 precepts and they're playing with their toys or their games, and then in a few years' time they think back and they think, I was allowed to play my games when I kept the 8 precepts, so they maybe get a wrong understanding, and you don't want that. So it can be a subtle point here. It's the same with adults. Sometimes husband and wife say, I'm keeping 8 precepts at home, and they're still living together in the same home, and generally speaking that's not really the 8 precepts. You would go to separate places to keep the 8 precepts, a monastery, or one stays at home, one goes out. If you're staying together, it's not really the 8 precepts. Another question. A while ago you shared about an earthquake near East Warburton. Was there anything behind it? Yeah, the movement of the Earth's plates. That's what's behind earthquakes. Things move and then they shake and vibrate the land. But I imagine you're thinking in terms of something spiritual. That's hard, isn't it? In the history of this monastery, we've had a few very brief earthquakes. The longest was about 1-2 minutes maybe. Didn't really damage anything, but you felt buildings shake. So one of them was 10 in the morning, one of them was 7 in the evening. We had one earthquake once just after Ajahn Chah's birthday, and I came back from Thailand. I'd attended his birthday and came back with a monk, Ajahn Amnat, a Thai monk, and it was his first day in Australia, and that evening we had an earthquake, and his kuti shook, our kuti on stilts, so they shake in an earthquake. So he came down the next morning, he said, Ajahn, you told me that there's a lot of wild animals here. I said, yep. He said, there was a really big deer came to my kuti last night. It must have crashed against the kuti. He thought it was a deer rocking his meditation hut. It was an earthquake. The Buddha behind me has Buddha relics which have come from many senior monks and monasteries from around the world, given to us. We're very fortunate, and we installed them with Luang Por Anand many years ago. The day before the Buddha relics were installed, we had an earthquake here. Perhaps that was an auspicious sign of what was happening. The Buddha relics were being installed. In the sutras and more in the commentaries about the sutras and in the Abhidhamma, they mention earthquakes. When the Deva who was born and became the Buddha was up in heaven realm, Sandusiteva Buddha. He had the aspiration, it's the right time for me to be born, and he knew he was going to become the Buddha. He's a bodhisattva. When he had that thought, they say there was an earthquake. Before the Buddha gave the Mangala Sutta, they say it was an earthquake. They say when someone gets enlightened, there's an earthquake. These are difficult to verify, but they say it's possible. When good things happen, auspicious things happen, profoundly auspicious things happen, there can be an earthquake, they say. Sometimes an earthquake is a warning of impermanence and not to be heedless, like when Moggallana was sent by the Buddha to warn Indra that he's wasting too much time enjoying life in the heaven realm, and he stamped his foot and the palace of Indra, Lord Indra of the Lord of the Devas, shook. But Indra is so smart, he just went, the Buddha sent a message, everything is impermanent, I shouldn't be wasting so much time here, I should get on with my practice. So a smart person will respond to something like a heavenly earthquake. Obviously earthquakes come from natural causes and they're very destructive. Luckily in Australia they're not very destructive, but in other parts of the world a lot of people die. So if an earthquake happens, well, see what you can do to help the people who are suffering. Another question, is there a clear distinction between thoughts and memory? Don't know if something's cut off here. It just says, is there a clear distinction between thoughts and memory? Well, we have the human being is divided into the 5 aggregates, groups of experience: form, body, feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neither pleasant nor unpleasant; memory or perception, the way you remember things; thought formations, mental states, and the karma producing mental states where we have intentional, volitional thoughts come up and leads on to action; and then sense consciousness, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and so on. Ultimately, we are separating them out through our practice and development of mindfulness and insight, samatha vipassana. And so ultimately you can recognize perception as perception, sanya kanda, as distinct from thought formations, sankhara kanda. The thing is, they arise together and they work together and they're very closely linked. So a lot of the time we miss it, we can't separate. But as you practice more mindfulness, your mind becomes more still. You start to see how perceptions are conditioning the mind and thought formations are conditioned with perception. They arise together and they condition each other, and the perceptions are like the details of our thoughts, the memories, the words, the images, the meaning we give to things, which feeds our thought formations. So you have the memory of a pleasant experience, and then you'll maybe have the desire to recreate or rehave that experience or get the thing that led to that experience. You have an unpleasant experience, you have the memory of it, and then you associate that unpleasant memory with that thing, that place, that person, and that will condition thought formations about how you relate to that place, that thing, that person. So as you practice more insight and reflect on your mental experience, you are starting to separate between memory and thought formation. But remember, they always arise together, so it's not something you can do casually. On paper you can separate, but in practice, often you're playing catch-up. Not ketchup, catch-up, as in you see anguish arise based on a memory or a perception that has arisen, and straight away you're thinking with craving about that angry perception. So you see somebody you don't like and you're straight away thinking thoughts, I don't like this guy, I want to get away, or I want to get him back. Perception is very quickly stimulating craving. And it also works with feeling. So part of the way craving arises, it arises dependent on feeling and perception together, they arise. So you see the guy you don't like, unpleasant feeling, unpleasant perception, some ill will may arise perhaps. Or you see the person you like, pleasant feeling, pleasant perception, start thinking more positive, desirable thoughts. So what we need is mindfulness to catch all this. Mindfulness and then investigation of the Dhamma, wisdom, to see what's going on. And a lot of our practice is based around this. Last question, I think. Oh no, two more. When one practices samatha meditation on the skin, does one put the intention only on one part of the body, say the hand, or does one move around the body? There's no one answer here, it can be both. Body contemplation, you tend to run through the 32 parts of the body first, remembering them, visualizing them, thinking about them, bringing attention to each part in succession, sometimes quite quickly, but as you do it more often, maybe more slowly, part by part. And then eventually maybe you just pick one part. But even then, say you're contemplating skin, like you say, it may be just one part of the skin in one part of the body today, but then tomorrow maybe you're focusing on another part of the body or another part of the skin in the body, another aspect of the skin in the body. So there's plenty of room for movement, experimentation here, and different insights will arise, but mainly into the impermanent, unattractive nature of skin and lack of self in skin. Skin is made up of 4 elements. It's not really a person or a being. It's largely the earth and the water element combining together to make this kind of, we call it a sealed bag of skin. And in meditation you're focusing on that. It's very sensitive, so there's also a lot of feeling and sensation through skin, but also just the nature of how skin kind of is like this bag holding everything else together inside. As soon as you open the skin through a cut, the inside starts to come out, blood and whatever. And if it's a corpse, well, skin will naturally burst apart over time as the corpse rots and degenerates. There's plenty of scope for investigation. So there's not one way of answering this. It's number one is be mindful of skin, if that's your chosen meditation object. Number two, keep investigating. You may find many different aspects of skin come up, sometimes as visual images, nimittas. Sometimes it's just your perception of skin as not self. So if you see something as not self, there's a sense, I don't own this. This is not me, this is not mine. I don't own this, I am not this. It's that kind of perception. So you might have skin, and it may be visually you're seeing, or in your meditation, or even just looking at it when you're peaceful. And this sense of, it doesn't belong to me, it's not a person, becomes stronger and clearer to the mind. And with that you get a reduction in greed, anger and delusion. Defilements start to fade away. We've gone on a long time tonight, so last question. Thank you for your patience. Using the skin as the object of meditation, can you please advise if one should focus on one's own body or others as well? Well, I would recommend always beginning with yourself, because that's what you've got. You've got all the information here. You can look at your skin, you can think about it, you can observe it, you can become mindful of it, you can investigate it as an object of Dhamma. Start with yourself, I would generally recommend that. But as you practice mindfulness, you're more mindful and aware of things, you can't help but notice other people. So Ajahn Chah used to say, well, as a monk walking on alms round, you get people putting food in your bowl. If you've got, say, some older person with wrinkly hands, so just contemplate, the aging of skin, for example. And it's just one small aspect of a human being, but there are many of those kind of reflections you can have when you see other people. Where you have to be careful is people who are around sexual desire, so usually the opposite sex. You see them, if you start focusing on their skin, very quickly your thoughts will turn from seeing the unattractiveness or not self of the skin to, I like it, I want it. Because that may be how sexual attraction manifests for you. You look at pictures of people that you find attractive, a lot of it is the skin, isn't it? The way the skin looks, the texture, the look, the colour. So usually you steer away from focusing on the bodies of people who will make you attracted. So you focus on yourself, people of the same gender, old people, or even corpses. Corpses are less attractive, so even a corpse can bring up a bit of attraction for some people. I've seen people, a monk goes and sees an autopsy. We used to do that in Thailand, and there's a young lady. Once we went to see a young lady who died from a motorcycle accident. She just had one injury on the head, and it had been cleared up, so you hardly noticed it, but it was enough to kill her. But she was young, maybe 20 years old and very attractive. She's lying there on the slab, and so it just looked like a young lady asleep because she had been only died the night before. So in those cases you have to be very careful, because instead of stimulating insight and wisdom, it can stimulate lust. So choose your object carefully. Don't just think of people who are going to bring up sexual desire for you. Steer away from them. So that's the end of the questions tonight. It's gone on rather a long time, so we'll end there and wish you all well in your practice.